This is Coder Radio, Episode 5, for July 9th, 2012. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
How you doing, Chris?
Hey, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good morning to you.
So what are we...
Good afternoon to our European friends. We have to get this right now.
Right. I know, it's very complicated, man. Something, time math is not my strong suit. So what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about the cloud, but I'm doing something different this episode.
Okay.
So half of it's going to be about the title topic, and the other half I'm doing a business topic.
Okay.
Because I feel like we keep getting away from the business side of, the art and business of software development.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of ignored it for 4 episodes.
Well, sometimes the business stuff can be a little boring, so I guess it's not like we don't have to dwell on it, but if we got something good to chew on.
Well, this won't be boring because I might Hulk out.
Oh, all right.
So
okay.
It could get rough.
Hulk out, huh? Well, it sounds like we got a lot to cover. Should we start with the feedback?
Let's do it.
What's our first one?
All right, so right off the bat, there was a little bit of confusion regarding multi-core in general, but also on Android.
Oh, yeah, I remember that discussion.
So the reference to multi-core on Android perhaps being not that good was written by an Intel engineer, not me.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I honestly don't know because I'm not a developer for Google on the Android project. Hell, I'm not a developer for Google. I'm just a little guy in New Jersey. So I am the wrong guy to talk to, whether with your suggestions on how to make it better, which I got, or with your hatred that it's not that good, or you disagreeing that it's not that good. It has nothing to do with me either way. If you disagree with Intel's report, I encourage you to do some studies and write your own. Honestly, I haven't done the research. Only point I was trying to make is that in your code, you have to handle asynchronousness and threading, even if the operating system does it for its code. So I wrote a blog post with an iOS example of, say, downloading a lot of large images asynchronously to not block the UI thread. Android has a similar mechanism. They have a number of classes that can do it because they can pull from the full Java ecosystem. I know the one I see used a lot is async task, and it's the one I've used. So my only point was that when you write your code, you have to handle the asynchronousness. And that's true. The system doesn't do it for you. Now, whatever's done by the system itself to render the screen or to animate the buttons, I got all kinds of stuff, Chris, about, well, when you swipe the screen, it doesn't lock. It's true, but that's the system. So there's a hard separation, right? Your code, Google's code.
And this kind of became a popular topic because the Nexus 7 has I think they put 2,000 cores in that thing. Of course, it needs a gas engine, but and so the whole capability of Android and how it handles multi-thread seems like that's a much more important topic.
It's a very important topic, but it's actually 2 topics. And I think it's partially my fault that I mentioned both points right next to each other.
Oh, okay. So
the one topic that you're kind of hinting at is what Google does on their own. And some of the stuff they may do for you in some cases. But you have to do a good deal of threading yourself. And actually, Google acknowledges this. If you go on any recent Android phone in settings, there's something called strict mode under the developer listing. Mm-hmm. That will flash your screen red if you're doing something that's too slow on the main thread, so to speak. And that's a great tool for developing and warning you when you need to handle things a little more asynchronously. So just wanted to clear that up.
Now, in your experience, this is sort of where the developers have to take this challenge on in their own code. And I'm sure the operating system has itself covered, but the developers are on their own. Is this is common? Would you say, how does this compare to, say, Windows? I guess Windows doesn't even have any multi-core yet. iPhone.
It's the same thing. And if you look at mdominic.com, I wrote a pretty detailed example of this problem on iOS and how you might address it.
Okay. You should put a link in the show notes to that. I mean, come on. That'd be cool. I'll go see if I can find it while you talk.
I mean, and there are cases like Turkey Pie in the chat saying where the compiler will catch you and stop you or warn you, but it's not 100% perfect.
Okay.
And I do recommend if you're developing on Android or any system, Android has that nice built-in utility to actually flash the screen red when you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, that is nice.
So there's no harm in checking.
Right.
And honestly, if you're doing any kind of large downloads or literally anything else big, you should be looking at this. And it has nothing to do with whether Android's a good platform or a bad platform or anything like that. That's way off base.
Yeah.
So
there, okay. I mean, yeah, and my sense is that my sense, I wouldn't worry about it too much, man. When you were talking about it, my sense was that you weren't being critical of Android. You were just kind of being critical of how well, I wouldn't even say you were being critical. You were just being poignant on how you have to handle multi-core processor situations when you're developing applications. And I think what it might be is maybe that situation isn't as perfect as it should be, and so maybe there was a little frustration in your tone, and that's what people picked up on. I don't know.
I think that's what it is. And I think there's just, mobile phones have a lot less memory. 3G is painfully slow. So this is a much bigger issue in the mobile space than it is, say, on your nice, 16 gig desktop.
Sure.
With your Fios connection.
Right.
So you can get away with a lot in your desktop Java app that you can't get away with in your Android app.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people were coming from. I got a lot of, I've been a Java developer for 10 years. I've never had to worry about that. Well, you've been a developer on a powerful server or on a powerful desktop. You can get away with murder. Basically, unless you have high usage or something like that.
Right. I found that link, so I will add that from your blog. I will add that to the show notes.
All right. So we asked Chris about should we do less news and more just general topics, and we got a resounding yes.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the people who wrote in a very long argument for it was Daniel. So just good work. And so that's what we're doing.
Okay. So we'll focus more on. I mean, if there's something really huge, you think we'll probably talk about it, but otherwise, we're gonna stay more down into the.
If there's something huge, we're gonna talk about it, and that's kind of what I did. If you look at today's notes,
okay,
there was something very big that I'm gonna mention, rant about a little bit, and then we're gonna move on.
Okay, cool.
Tom was asking more about the Android SDK tools. We will probably cover it eventually. The issue is I haven't downloaded all the new tools and started using all the new tools just yet. So I want to actually use them a little bit first before I say anything.
Sure.
And Chris, you've been judged, man.
Judgment has been dealt to me by the audience, huh? Let me see. Could this be about some of my comments regarding, I don't know, maybe the Nexus Q or something like that from the Google I.O. show?
It might be. It might have a lot. I mean, I guess you don't understand audio is what it sounds like.
Okay.
I mean, I would cry if you were running a radio station.
I know.
Honestly.
Could you imagine if I was responsible for audio quality? Could you imagine how awful that might sound? That'd just be.
Honestly, let me unsubscribe to everything right now. Hang on.
You didn't know. See, you didn't know. You didn't listen to anything before you got involved in this whole podcast racket.
No.
I mean.
I just chilled in the IRC. That was about it.
All right. So what was the general, was there any themes to the criticism?
Well, there were two criticisms. One was definitely very rational, that the cost of the product is related more towards the type of audio amplifier they put in that's very expensive.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was saying. The second, apparently you hate Google, which I was unaware of, but...
Even though my entire life is all wrapped up in Google services from the phone to the business end, but okay.
Yeah, but I don't know if you had any...
So I maintain...
Yeah.
That I think that audio amplifier they put in the Nexus Q is such a perfect example of where they went wrong in the design process. Because if that added, I'd say, more than $30, which it probably did, because it sounds like it's a decent component. What a horrible misjudgment. Okay, Michael, so let's picture the scenario where you're buying a $300 device that then comes with no content. So you are then buying content from the Google Play Market, the only source for content, and you're going to take this $300 device and you're going to buy some very high-end speakers to play this compressed stream audio, and you're going to hook those speakers up directly to a Google Nexus Q. No, anybody that's buying this is already going to have a TV system to watch the video, the movies, and speakers hooked up to a receiver. And you're going to hook the Nexus Q up to your receiver. And you're not going to use the amp at all. You're probably going to use the HDMI port out the back of the Nexus Q into a receiver. And you won't and the amp will sit there inactive. It won't do a thing. The only time the amp becomes active is if you use those actual banana plugs on the back and wire speakers directly into the back of the thing. And nobody is going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I just put this in because it was funny. This is a dead horse, right? The market is going to decide, and even the reviewers, I think Gizmodo, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me. It's not doing well, and sales are not apparently very good. So
yeah, and I know another argument is it costs more because it's made in America, and I'm sure that's a little partially true.
It's not, according to the New York Times, though.
Oh, really?
That the real cost is in some of mainly in the amplifier, but also not the actual labor in America, but that the supply chain isn't in America. So there's apparently some kind of extra transit cost.
The other thing that's really weird is it came with mini HDMI instead of HDMI. So you got to have a dongle hanging off the back of this thing that's weirdly shaped. I wish they could have just done Google TV 3.0 or 4.0 or something, something just a huge leap in Google TV that added all of this social streaming experience, all of the Play integration, all of that stuff, and made the Google TV a real competitor. Maybe some DVR capabilities that were really sharp, and maybe you could do some like Slingbox action to that, and then you'd really have a compelling product, and the $300 price point would be a steal. But at this, it's a non-starter. And I'm sorry people don't like that. I'm not hating on Google. I think Google's great. I use all of their products. I just won't be buying this.
Yeah, really the point I wanted to make with this is not, to bury the Nexus Q again, but to say it's okay to like a company, but if you're a professional software developer, it's not okay to love a company. I get accused of being an Apple fanboy all the time, but I'm very quick to do things the non-Apple way if it's better for me.
Yeah, they have a clear monetization path that as a business person you're going to follow, and that's not necessarily being a fanboy. That's just being a sound business person.
Right, but as a business person, you can't say, "I'm going to go support every product Apple or Google or whoever makes."
Right.
You'll be out of business.
Yeah.
You'll be buying so many tablets. It's just it's not an acceptable strategy.
Right. I mean, imagine if you had thrown in, like, you had decided, oh my gosh, the Motorola Zoom is going to be the ultimate iPad killer. I'm going to create
one of those.
You did? Okay. Well, imagine if you threw in like your whole development path behind that. You were going to develop like a magazine application for it or something like that because you thought the Zoom was going to do amazing. And think about that could have potentially killed you right there. That you would have wasted so much time and money on that. So you do have to be kind of skeptical with some of this stuff.
You really do. And, it's one thing if you're just, an employee somewhere, but even then you really shouldn't be religious because let's be honest, it's annoying for your coworkers. Like if you're a Google fanboy and somebody comes with an iPhone, don't harass them. Like just don't do it.
Yeah, I don't think I would have wanted to do the show with you if you were like so hardcore fanboyism. I like your pragmatic look towards things because that's the same approach I have.
Well, the problem is, like the Ubuntu thing is a great example. I'm hard at work on the Ubuntu app, but if it turns out to be a total loss, I might have to rethink that.
Right.
But having said that, I don't think that's going to happen because the Ubuntu community is amazing. So
yeah.
Moving on.
Did you see the app Showdown thing that you probably watched? If you watched last, I covered it, but that's a really neat thing they're doing too.
I tell you, Canonical's doing a lot for developers, including misleading them, but that's not the point. Still a little bitter. My only concern is that we talked about it. We don't need to beat a dead horse. That they're going to become just as locked down as say Apple or even Android to a point.
They've got a long, long competitive road ahead of them before they can get to that point, though.
Yeah, they have to get developers first.
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Yeah.
All right. So our buddy Nicholas wrote a blog post about us that he says got over 3,000 views in something like 2 days.
The Linux Journalist. Yeah, he's active on the Linux Action Show subreddit, and he's also on the Unfilter subreddit. So yeah. This is great. He wrote up a nice little piece about the new show when we launched it, and he also gave a nice mention to some of the other, basically all the other shows. He said he absolutely loves it too. So this is, if you enjoy our programming and you don't have the money to contribute and you don't use the affiliate link, something like that, but you still really, you really want to help these shows grow, this kind of stuff is people. There's like a psychological study, and this is the secret sauce to Facebook, is when people see somebody they trust say something is good, they're like a jillion times more likely to actually check it out than if they just saw like some random ad or something like that. So that's why Facebook, when you like a product and somebody else sees it in the stream, they'll say so-and-so also likes this. And even at a very low level, your monkey brain goes, oh, I know that person. And they like that thing? Maybe I'll like that thing. And so that's why things like these blog posts really are the true word-to-word mouth spreading that helps the show organically grow and make really passionate fans. So thank you to Nicholas for doing that.
Yeah, keep it up. And, if anybody else has been writing... Sorry about that.
Maybe that's Nicholas calling you right now.
I think it's him calling to... Actually, no. It looks like it's Google Fan 123. I think this call might be for you.
Wow. They're coming from me from all angles. Well, that's awesome. So
if you have any other posts or any other comments, just shoot them to, I think it's coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Is that right?
Yep. And there's they can hit the contact button at the top of the website and then just choose Coder Radio as the show they want to contact. Before we go any further, I know I mentioned this last week, but we have a new affiliate that's just a perfect fit with the show, and it's called Code School. Well, hello, Siri. And Siri's here to tell us about Code School. Now, Michael, one of the things that you noted is the people who are working with us on that new Jupiter Broadcasting mobile app, some of those folks are not familiar with Git. Well, guess what? Not only does Code School have a tutorial on Git, but it's free. It is free, and if you complete the tutorial, you actually get $5 towards a one that's not free, which is really awesome because it seems like they're making more and more of their courses free. So this is neat. This whole Code School concept is you get in there, you actually do some coding, or in the case of Git, you probably would just not do coding, but you know what I mean. And they have different sections, and then you get different badges that show up on your profile, and you can get points towards other lessons, and they are extremely, extremely well done. They also have video production, and as somebody who does video production, they have some very cool multi-layered green screen stuff going on. What was the other course you said that was free, Michael? Was it Journey into Mobile?
So it looks like actually all of their courses have the first lesson, so to speak, for free. I know it's Journey to Mobile. I think RSpec was also free, and something about Node.js had a free level.
So check out, if you're watching the enhanced version, check out the video they do on these. Very professional. I like these.
Today, the web can be touched by millions of users in different environments, from pocket-sized to wide screens. Assuming that all designs can fit within a tight pixel grid just doesn't make sense anymore. On his journey into mobile, Jason Van Loo...
So I'm going to jump ahead so you can see his cool set that he's got. Let's see, where is it?
Response.
Wait for it. No. I can't find it. He's got a really great green screen setup. And as somebody who also has a green screen setup, I just got to give him mad props because I know how hard that is to do. So they're really putting a lot of effort into all of these productions, and I really respect that. And so if you would like to support the show and also start down the path of maybe freshening up some skills or learning some fundamentals of something new or whatever it might be, check out the link in the show notes. You do have to use that link in order for Coder Radio to get credit for that. But if you sign up, we get a nice little kickback, which is really cool. It's a good way for you to get something for yourself while you are also supporting the show. All right, Michael, well, why don't we move on?
Sounds like a plan.
What is our, are we going to jump into one of our main topics now?
Yeah, we're going to jump into developing for the cloud, and here's why.
Okay.
A bolt of lightning ruined my week last week.
Oh, no, really? Oh, right.
Zeus was chilling in Olympus. And he said, you see that server in Virginia?
Right.
I'm taking it out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, has anybody here played Jenga?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that server was that one block you can't push out without knocking down the whole tower.
So not just you, though. I mean, like Netflix suffered outages.
Yes.
A lot of companies suffered outages. What happened what of yours went down?
One of my clients, his entire app went down.
Oh, no.
In my defense, he refused using more than one zone. So if you're not familiar, so the way EC2 and a lot of these cloud providers work is you have more than one availability zone, and they map to physical locations in the world. For instance, Amazon's biggest one is, they call it EC2 Northeast, which is Virginia. Mm-hmm. They have one in California, one in Ireland. I think they may have one in Singapore now. And I know there's one somewhere in the Midwest of the United States, I think. I could be wrong. But the main two are California, Virginia, and then in Europe, the main one's Ireland. But the prices tend to be lower on the one in Virginia. because that one's bigger and has more availability.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of mistakes get made when people just use one. And here's what happens if that zone goes down and your app is only on that zone. Your app 404s.
Right, the server's down, and
Server's down.
This has happened before. And Amazon, last time they had a big outage, they kind of made these whole rounds of blog posts that said, "Okay, all right, everybody, do multi-zone. I know it costs more, but there's ways you can do it so that way you're only chilling in one zone unless something happens and the other zone fires up. So we want you guys to really kind of rethink how you do this." Now, the problem is it costs money.
Yeah. Now in Amazon's, or actually, this is kind of an indictment of Amazon. This case, multi-zone may not have helped you.
Oh, really?
Because they had a cascading failure that caused even services that were properly zoned to fail in some cases. So this was an Amazon failure in a lot of ways.
Was Amazon's website down? No.
No, of course not. It would require a nuclear strike for Amazon's website to go down.
You just can I have my stuff on that server?
Yeah, good luck. So before we get into how to develop for the cloud, because honestly, it's not terribly hard versus developing for a server, there's a few things you might want to know. The one thing is the zones, which I think we covered, and you definitely need to do your research. One thing to do actually is figure out where are your users. For instance, for my client, spinning up an instance in Ireland would not make sense because his users are almost all in the United States. So for him, the best idea would be Virginia, California.
Right.
Good coverage, good availability.
Mm-hmm.
But the other big thing is you probably want to read those terms of service. We're kind of in a Dropbox, Google Drive situation here where they can kind of do anything they want in most cases with most providers, and you have no recourse. And this is everything from, they get a subpoena they don't tell you about. Or, I don't think Amazon's doing anything sinister with your data, but if you have reason to be concerned with government intervention, I think that you should roll your own server and not go to the cloud. Additionally, the pricing terms on these software as a service platforms, they're a little rough, right? They start off free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You just can't do much with that free server.
Can't do much. The minute, if anybody puts your service on Reddit or Hacker News, it's going down.
Yeah.
And then Heroku's a great example. I love Heroku. They're easy to deploy to, but they nickel and dime you.
Huh.
Just getting a MongoDB service is $5 on top of usage, on top of bandwidth, on top of the incremental charge for memory.
And some of them charge for CPU. If your CPU goes over a certain threshold for a certain period of time, they start billing. And
exactly. So it's kind of, it looks like it's cheap. It's like $5 here, $10 here. You could end up with a $200 a month bill. Where had you gone with a VPS or a dedicated box, or hell, even a colo, you would have been better served.
I was running an experiment for a client, and I set up a very mid-level, like they have like 2 or 3 different tiers of Windows servers. And they wanted something semi-decent because they were going to do some automated processing on it. So I got like a mid-level one. And they set it up, and then they decided, we're going to wait. And the server just sat there idle for a month. And it just sitting idle, not doing a single thing, charged like $270 or something like that. Well,
actually, Chris, you bring up another issue. The prices they show you are the Unix prices. Windows is always an upcharge.
Yeah.
With every service I've seen.
Yeah.
And they always require you to have more RAM to run Windows.
Yeah.
So if your client is, let's say, a ASP.NET person.
That was the thing. Yep.
Where you're a .NET developer, you might want to bake that into your charge.
Right.
If you're handling the hosting for them. Because the costs just keep going up and up and up.
From a business side, when you say work in the charge, what is your opinion about doing something like hosting some of these things under a reseller account and actually selling the hosting service as part of your business and giving them a slight upcharge? And do you ever do that, or do you just connect the client directly with the hosting provider? They arrange the payment stuff, and they're on the account, and you really just kind of get the application layer going, and you step away. What do you think?
I have only done that once because I won't do that without a maintenance contract.
Yeah,
which I charge for.
Right, that could be a way to secure some recurring revenue.
Well, also, I will only do that. I won't do that for SaaS. I'll only do that for either a VPS, dedicated server, or infrastructure. Because that does warrant the maintenance. I mean, we've heard about, even if you're not using PHP, you have an outdated PHP on your CentOS box, and, there's an exploit.
I love that Bretrail in the chat room has provided us with getthefacts.com, where we can learn that Windows has a lower total cost of ownership. Unless you're in the cloud.
I'm not hating on Windows. I'm just saying that if you're using Amazon as an example,
you go look at Amazon's prices. It's a fact.
They're charging you more. And in my case, a Windows server would in fact be more expensive to run because I'm less familiar. I mean, I've been using Ubuntu and FreeBSD servers forever. Well, that's not entirely true. I use CentOS and Fedora as well. But basically Unix servers. And this is definitely not a Windows versus Unix thing. It's just when you're pricing things out for either your manager or clients, you need to look at what is the real cost versus that, 0.2 cents an hour they're telling you.
Just for reference, because I think, definitely Rackspace is another major player in the space, but Amazon seems to be kind of with EC2 leading the pack, and so I'll just pull up their prices. So here's an example. If you wanted something that was like a high CPU instance, something that could chug through some database queries, something like that, and we'll call it not the extra large version, but the medium version, which is what my client had here. So for Linux or Unix, it's 16 cents per hour. And for Windows, it's 28 cents per hour, just with no other bandwidth or any other surcharges on top, just the base price. So it's about 30 cents for Windows, and it's about 17 cents for Linux.
Yeah, and that's quite the upcharge.
But it's fine. And then when you get to things like GPU processing, it starts getting much more expensive on the Windows platform.
Yeah, and you mentioned Rackspace. I actually prefer Rackspace to Amazon in some cases. One case is that Rackspace, you can actually call them.
Oh, yes.
So that's, I'm not a system admin by trade, and sometimes I'm willing to pay for that support instance.
Well, and when you have an outage and the clients or whatever, it's your app or whatever, and they're calling you and you don't know what's going on, and you can't give them really solid answers, you can say, well, the last thing Amazon said was when they wrote their blog 2 hours ago.
Yeah, and the client's not mad at Amazon ever.
No.
The client's mad at you.
Right. Or it could be the reverse. It could be your app has some sort of cloud-based. Like I think of like the Instapaper scenario where Marco makes his money through the sale of Instapaper.
Sure.
But Instapaper really relies on a back-end cloud processing to actually do the processing of the websites and all that kind of stuff. And so if Marco's cloud system goes down, his app doesn't work across all of it. So it's maybe not even a client issue. It could just be, as developers, kind of getting back to the main topic here, is as developers program more and more and rely on services that are in the cloud, these outages will just break regular applications, desktop apps, mobile apps that just use cloud services as part of their function.
Yeah, honestly, most mobile apps do have some kind of cloud service behind them. Even games now, whether you're using, some kind of in-app purchase module, it's hard to get away from this. And you bring up a good point about developing for it. So if you're being charged by usage, writing efficient code becomes really important. Because literally that for loop, that doesn't need to be a for loop, that could be perhaps made more efficient via recursion or something like that, is actually costing you real dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So the cloud is great, and this is not beat up on the cloud hour. You just have to approach it a little differently.
Because these kind of outages could be programmed around, right? Don't you think? In most cases, could you not, if you had the right solution, or at least fail gracefully or something like that? Isn't there something developers can do to sort of
theoretically. I mean, your budget might get in the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have unlimited money, you could have a VPS somewhere, Amazon, you could have redundant systems and fail back. That's generally not the case. But yeah, you're right. Theoretically, you could.
Yeah.
Usually you have one or two failbacks. And
could do something like what I've done for some clients for their website is have it set up. There's some ways you can do this with DNS where when their website goes down, it fails them over to a cheap kind of just, sorry, we're experiencing an outage site. So there's still something there. It's still their logo. It's still them. They still have a presence. But so I said, well, we'll just fail gracefully over to this.
And that's usually, honestly, for lower budget projects, that's the most common thing I've done is just, we fail to some kind of branded 404 page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh dear,
Yeah.
our servers are on fire. Kind of,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the other thing is these platforms all have lock-in.
Oh yeah.
And again, the prices start low. They get pretty high. Now, lock-in is more applicable to software as a service. Again, Heroku is a good example. You can really build your whole workflow around Heroku. Some very convenient Git deployment, things like that. But as the cost scales, it might become harder to get off of Heroku. Or any of these servers. I mean, .cloud, they're all the same, right? They all have this element of lock-in.
Yeah, they have their own storage API or whatever it is that you have to use.
Yeah, it's just something to consider, especially, you don't want your manager saying, gee, Chris, this was great when we started 6 months ago, but the costs are killing us. I'm going to give you 2 days to move us onto these dedicated servers here.
Right.
And that may not be possible in 2 days.
Right. And I think Rackspace is better in some circumstances because they support things like OpenStack. So there's some, at that platform level, there's some portability. But again, they also have their own sort of custom storage system you can write to and things like that you wouldn't be able to just pick that application up and move it without some serious code rewrite.
That's true. I mean, you can selectively use Rackspace and EC2 to prevent lock-in, but you're giving up some of their features. And that's just a trade-off. But the bigger problem with these is, Chris, are you sitting down?
I'm ready. I'm sitting.
I hate to tell you that unicorns do not exist.
Oh, but they're pretty.
And the magical scaling fairy is also a lie.
Uh-oh. I've got to dramatically rethink my infrastructure then.
There is no magic button that you can push to scale your app up to 50,000 concurrent requests without, if you wrote a crappy app.
I disagree. All you do is just type Alan in the IRC chat room over at jblive.tv and say, Alan, I need to scale more. And then Alan just takes care of it for you. That's my magic button.
So is it like break glass, get Alan? Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right, so
oh my gosh, Alan, we need scale. We need scale.
Fair enough. Okay,
Yeah.
So for everybody else
Right.
who doesn't have, a Canadian sysadmin in a glass case just sitting at his desk, there's no magical button.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure if we talk to Alan's scale engine, he probably puts a tremendous amount of effort into being able to do that for you.
Yeah. No, he has his whole system is, but the reason his whole system works is because we've modified the Jupiter Broadcasting WordPress site to work with it, right? So now it's doable, but we had to invest the time, or Alan had to invest the time to make that work.
You had to modify your code a bit to actually make it possible. Yeah. And your infrastructure. And that's the thing. And my next point is Alan and people like Alan, I pray for a free sysadmin, really.
Yeah.
Sysadmins are magical people that can save you money. If your web app actually becomes big, you might want to definitely consider hiring one, or at least a sysadmin or a DBA, someone to, because those are the pain points, really,
Right.
your database. And if you get big enough scaling, don't be afraid to make the call, because honestly, that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's great. Like in terms of, I feel like I would probably have the capability of designing and implementing an infrastructure for Jupiter Broadcasting, but I would spend all of my time doing that. I would really, it would be a full-time gig, and I need to focus on the content. And so Alan is essentially my cloud solution. It's a custom cloud solution. That's what's great about Scale Engine. It's cloud hosting, but it's like a best of all worlds kind of approach. Whereas EC2 sort of has a very, rigid approach you have to take. But again, that's the same kind of scenario. Is if there wasn't an Alan, maybe I would look at something like using EC2 or Rackspace for hosting.
Now, let me ask you, Scale Engine, does it let you host the whole app, or is it just media?
Oh, no, it's, whatever you need. Yeah, it can be virtual machines. It could be database hosting. It can be CDN distribution.
I have an email to write. Anyway, yeah, so the point is, when you're reading the feature sheet on all these services, they all say they scale, and they're all lying.
Right.
It's not as easy as hitting a button. I mean, I'm sorry if you work for one of these companies, but you have to admit, if the person doesn't write their code, to be, quote, web scale, there's nothing you can do for them.
My client right now that I'm working for on occasion is dealing with this. They have a system that was written 10 years ago. It was very progressive at the time, but it's a site that has thousands and thousands and thousands of subpages because it's user-generated content. They upload diagrams and things like that. And now they have 10,000 static HTML files the system has generated. And, how do you scale that when it's all sitting on one file system and the system's growing? It's a huge problem because the developer never...
Oh, no, that's really easy. That's really easy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Sudo rm tac r, and you start again.
Yeah. Seriously, the problem is the developer never even considered the possibility we might have more than one database server and more than one web server. So everything we've had to build around it is sort of to try to trick it that it's still only talking to one server. And we're always hitting our head against the wall. That's
kind of hellish, I'll be honest. So, not to beat this to death, but really, if you think your site's going to be the next Facebook, you might want to consider, preparing for this kind of thing.
It's not even that. It's just kind of what you're distributing. If you're distributing media files and things like that, even just getting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 downloads concurrently for a standard.
That's true.
Yeah. So if you just build for whatever the purpose is going to be. It's not even have to be for traffic. It'd just be good responsive design.
Very good. Should we move on to Google's compute engine?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic.
This is like the Challenger rocket of compute engines right here.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple things about compute engine. What is it? It's infrastructure as a service, right? So it's important not to get it confused with Google's App Engine, which is software as a service. Again, the difference is you can actually code to the App Engine API. Infrastructure as a service is they're spinning up virtual, quote, cloud Unix boxes for you. I think they offer Ubuntu or something. Mm-hmm. I had it written down, and now I can't read my handwriting.
I'm pretty sure it's Ubuntu long-term support.
Yeah, it's Ubuntu LTS, and I think CentOS. So compute engine is very similar to EC2 in what it does, and similar to Rackspace. Mm-hmm. It's a little different in terms of who it's for. If you look at the pricing page, which Chris is very helpfully bringing up, you'll notice the minimum RAM is approximately 3.7 gigs.
All right. And they go right after that up to 7.5, then they're up into 15, and then boom, off to 30. 30 gigs of RAM.
30 gigs of RAM. This is not for your small web app or your small, Android app backend.
No.
This is, in fact, one of their banner partners they're listing is a biotech university using it to, I think, encode DNA or something like that.
Awesome.
So this is for the tremendously hardcore or the, quote, enterprise people.
Ethereal IP address is free, but if you want a static IP address, it costs $0.01 an hour.
Everything costs. Yeah, well, and that's another example of this, pay-per-use, pay-per-feature model.
Yeah.
They also have their own measurement of CPU usage. I think they call it Google Cloud Usage Hour or something.
Yeah.
Which has an interesting explanation. But again, this is definitely a good option if you're big.
A measure of computational power of our instances based on industry benchmarks.
It's also
really
vague.
Weird. Yeah.
But I mean, let's just assume positive intent and say they're not trying to rob you here.
No, in fact, it might even be if they're basing it on benchmarks, and then so that might be that you might be like kind of actually that might actually work out better for the customer.
Yeah, and everything I've been reading about this, so this is not something I would deploy. But everything I've been reading about this is for the big boys. I mean, you have lots of data. You're doing some very intensive calculations.
This is amazing because if you could work on something, and then when you just got to the phase where you just needed incredible calculations, you just take that and you just hand it off to this compute engine, assuming you've programmed whatever you need to do in order for it to work correctly on here. Gosh, that's such an incredible. This is the kind of power we're getting access to is just Joe Schmoes now is incredible.
But again, because Chris, I got an email asking about I think the kids in high school developer emailed me. He has an idea for web app. Should he host it on the Google Compute Engine because it looks cool?
Oh, okay.
Answer's no.
Yeah.
It's just too big. You don't need it. You're going to waste money, especially if you're in high school. I don't think you can afford it. Or if you can, good luck. I mean, nice for you. This is, again, for all the enterprise guys, this might be something for you to look at.
Yeah.
If you're working with startups or you're doing your small web app, this is a bit out of your league, though it is very exciting because honestly, their prices for that scale, not too bad.
Mm-mm.
I mean, that's That's one of the criticisms of EC2 is that it's relatively cheap to start out, incredibly expensive when you get higher. More competition, lower prices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too to see companies like Amazon and Google. They move into this because they've got the infrastructure in place, so it's something they can kind of lay down on top of the infrastructure. And one of the things Google got right from the very beginning is they own their data connections between their data centers. In most cases, they really have spent a lot of time and patience on building out a really incredible infrastructure for their data centers around the world. I mean, they have one of the most impressive that's out there. So if anybody can pull this off on a massive scale at a reasonable price, it's got to be them.
Oh yeah, this is a great. I mean, if you're a university or you're something like that and you need some kind of big processing, honestly, I think this is a game changer for that market. But for the smaller market, it's kind of a non-starter.
Yeah. There's definitely it's only going to appeal to a niche.
Having said that, it has some great features.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a custom image if it's based on the specific versions of CentOS and Ubuntu. So you can kind of preload with whatever your stack is, Java, Python, whatever. They have a RESTful API, which is great. So you can actually write a script to automate some stuff to intelligently react to any kind of issues. That's something, if you're doing cloud, you should definitely look for an API. Amazon has an API as well. And I think Rackspace does.
Oh, yeah.
Just for full disclosure. How does it compare to EC2 and Rackspace? Well, again, it's for the bigger players. This is more for heavy math people or heavy enterprise people.
Right. Whereas EC2, there's actually with some they even have a free instance where if you're just doing like a little test thing,
Yeah.
you could just go roll that yourself in a matter of 15 minutes and you'd have a server up and running. So that's definitely more approachable than I'd say the Google Compute Engine.
Yeah, and also, with those free tiers, if you're doing a beta, just go with the free tier. If it crashes in beta, I think that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So again, there's a slight risk of lock-in, but a little less so with infrastructure as a service, right? Because you're down to the metal. You're not coding to, say, .cloud or Heroku's API. You're coding to Ubuntu or CentOS in this case.
Much more portable.
Much more portable, assuming you don't dig too deeply into their API.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, you're okay. So Chris, we've talked about platform as a service, and I think we've talked about the risks enough. Wouldn't you say, or do you feel that it's still a little vague?
No, I mean, I think, just through this whole episode, we've kind of been touching on some of them with the recent outage and things like that. So I think it's pretty well understood is that there's definitely some risk, but there's definitely some advantages too. And I've taken the advantage of, I feel like I'm utilizing essentially cloud hostings through Allen, and that's the route I've chosen based on the risks and the advantages.
Yeah. So just one advantage of the software as a service or platform as a service model, I use Heroku and .cloud for betas or demoing because they have a free tier and it's incredibly quick to deploy, and I don't have to worry about administering a server at all.
Okay.
So it's one thing, you shouldn't write off either option. You have to find what's appropriate for you.
Yeah.
Again, if you're an enterprise user, I would probably not use platform just because I'm sure budget's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want anybody to have any uncomfortable manager conversations because of me.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I would feel terrible. But really,
I was listening to this show, and this guy on there said I should do this.
So I did it, and now I have like a $2,000 hosting bill, and I got fired. Yeah, but I honestly sit down within a Google Docs spreadsheet, do some calculations, figure out the cost. That's how I determine which hosting is appropriate for individual clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Don't forget to do Coda Radio.
Yes, an hour late. All right, so Chris, I'm a very upset person.
Uh-oh. Is this about the recent App Store little snafu?
A little snafu.
Just a little one. No, it only affected a small number of customers between something.
So let me ask you, if Alan decided to unplug Scale Engine, would that be a little snafu?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that would not be good.
You'd have a problem, right?
Yeah, that would not be ideal.
So for those who don't know, Apple, and again, I said they're no good at services, no good at servers. They have a DRM server, and a number of them, obviously, they're very big.
Yeah, they do
that. When you upload your binary, they sign it to prevent piracy. Fantastic. All well and good.
Okay.
However, if they sign it incorrectly, guess how they handle an error? They crash. And there's no notice that comes up and says, Apple or iOS has encountered an error. This app may be pirated. We're sorry. Crash.
Right.
It just says crash. It just crashes.
Yeah.
And then if the user plugs in their iPhone, all they see is, one example. Marco Arment is the one who broke the story. Instapaper crashed. Now, what do you think a lot of people do when they get apps that they download just paid for and crash?
I would assume it's the app. I would never even think it's the DRM.
But what's the average user's next move?
Okay, I'm going to jump. If I just got it, I'm going right back into iTunes, and man, am I pissed. And this app doesn't even run!
God damn it. It's a mess.
Yeah.
There were a rash of 1-star reviews, nasty comments for a lot of developers because Apple made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I had made a mistake like this, I'd probably have to do a big mea culpa. I'm sorry on Google+, maybe write a blog post, blah, blah, blah.
Explain what happened, how people can avoid that kind of thing.
And make it right.
Yeah.
If Apple does it, they might say nothing. When they finally say something, say, we had a little server error.
We had a temporary issue that began yesterday with a server that generated DRM code for some apps being downloaded. It affected a small number of users.
Now, my issue is not that the error happened because bad things can happen, right?
Yeah.
My issue is with how they handled the 1-star reviews and the bad ratings.
Oh, yeah?
They didn't delete them.
Right.
They suppressed them. What they did is they relisted your app as a new update with the same update number.
Yeah.
So they didn't mess with your release schedule, but they just did it to hide the 1-star reviews.
Well, they also did it because then it'll everybody's iOS device will show there's an update, so it'll download the fixed version of the binary, right?
But my issue is if the user clicks the older version reviews, they're going to see a rash of 1-star reviews for the last version, a rash of nasty comments. And honestly, when I'm in the App Store, even the Android App Store, if I see something crashes, I don't download it.
Right.
They could have done better by the developers here. And this is just another risk of depending on these app stores and these cloud platforms.
The thing that Marco did that I liked, not really related to this, is he also tracked how the different websites covered his story.
Oh, yeah. He got very upset. So for those who don't know, he broke the story on Twitter and then wrote a blog post. And some big tech publications copied the story.
The Verge, The Next Web, Gizmodo.
And failed to link back.
Mm-hmm.
And some didn't mention him at all, which is scummy.
Some of them took like word for word, like The Next Web took word for word stuff, and then wherever he wrote I, put we or were.
We.
Yeah.
So plagiarism's still bad, kids. Your teachers smacked your hand for it.
Scummy stuff.
All right. So this got me thinking about DRM and piracy.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you think about DRM, I think we have a soundbite, don't we?
Horror stories. It's a little garbled, but I made that last night for you.
Awesome. That's fantastic. just good stuff.
So you have a DRM horror story, or what do you have?
I have a piracy horror story. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Out of real world experience.
Okay.
And we didn't really announce this, but this is a new section. Please submit your development or business dev horror stories to coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Yeah.
And your Nexus Q love to Chris, LAS, at jupiterbroadcasting.com.
It's just Chris at Jupiter Broadcasting. I don't think I have LAS. This
should probably get that.
No, maybe I shouldn't.
Anyway, so my horror story.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, I had a little Android app. It was 99 cents, and it was a password generator. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I was getting a lot of user emails, feature requests, and support requests, but I only had 60 total downloads in the Android market. I was very confused.
Yeah. That didn't match up, does it? So did you first think maybe the stats were wrong?
I thought the stats were wrong, and I emailed them at Google and naturally didn't get a reply. It's pretty much standard. So one email mentioned that the guy had some issues, but he was happy that the app was free and thought it was a good value.
Okay.
I emailed him back, free. This app's not free. It was never free. He sends me a link to some very poorly laid out site with incredibly broken English that simply had an APK of my binary up there. Chris, do you know what a temper tantrum is? You have children.
Yes, I do. I do. Yes.
I did throw one. I have to admit, the app was pulled so fast, and I wrote a nasty letter to the website. So, the end result, I now have approximately 200 emails from, quote, users with feature requests and bug fixes that aren't in fact users. Of them, I know that there are 60 legitimate users of the app.
That is wow.
Right. So I'm at an impasse, right? What do I do? I've only made approximately $50 on the app because Google gets their cut. Even less, actually.
Right?
I have all these emails, and then most of them were nice, simple bug reports, feature requests. What do I do? So first thing I do is, again, I email Google saying, I'm having some trouble. Is there any way what can I do here? And I get no response because
right. It's
pretty much standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I email the website. I get no response. I start emailing people back, and some of them got a little uppity because I had said, where did you get the app? There's a new version on the market. So I had to fix some of the bugs. So this is an issue, right? Because DRM could have potentially solved this problem.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, DRM could have created another problem.
As we've seen.
Yes. So before I tell you exactly what I did, which I think is actually pretty obvious, but when you're developing a product, in my experience, you're going to have problems in terms of piracy, and I really don't know how to turn that off.
People are now going to email you telling you how to mute the phone,
Yeah, I hope please email me. How do you turn off that iCloud message thing? Because it's annoying. And I would actually, speaking of email, I'd be interested if people would email me, how they dealt with this issue. I mean, I'm sure Brian Lunduke has had to deal with this, although his business model is a little different now, so it probably doesn't matter. Because on the one hand, Chris, what I ended up doing was pulling the app.
Mm-hmm.
And I just refused to do support requests.
Well, one of the things Google announced at Google I/O was that,
DRM.
Yeah.
Interesting action on their part, don't you think? Because I'm not the only one who's had this problem.
No. In fact, there was a blog post by, I think, was it id Software or someone who said
right.
They're just going to avoid the App Store for now because they have piracy issues, and there's some sort of DRM that comes in. And look at the success that Amazon's had, and Amazon has a much more tightly controlled marketplace.
Amazon, I believe, when you upload your app, they do what Apple does, which is generate a token based on the device. So even if you jailbreak your device or hook it in and can actually pull the APK out, you can never run it on a different device. It's I'm sure many in the audience, it's conflicting, right? You don't want DRM, right? Because I hate the 1 in a million case where the DRM actually messes up a legit user.
Right.
And again, I can't have 200 support emails for only 60 legitimate users.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Mm-mm.
I mean, and all of them are support. Some are feature requests or, I like the app, whatever. I think this is one of those situations where as an industry, we have to go the pragmatic route and say, you can't fight human nature. DRM is going to be a necessary evil. And I'm not even implying that everybody who pirated the app knew they were doing something wrong. Somebody could have showed them a website. Oh, you could get it here for free.
What about the situation? Well, do you know if Google's is going to be developer controlled? Can you turn it on and off? No reason to have DRM on a free app.
Well, there is a reason to have DRM on a free app.
Oh, there is.
If you want to know how many users you have and don't want to do any kind of Google Analytics or Flurry Analytics.
I guess you might also then say, well, I only want people to install it from the marketplace. That way I can make sure people get updates and things like that.
That too, right?
If you grab the APK, then you no longer receive updates for it from the marketplace.
Which is another problem.
Yeah.
Entirely. I mean, we could make 1,000 arguments why pirating any kind of software is a bad idea. But it's almost a moot point. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even pirating on other platforms. I mean, every platform has the problem. Just Android had it a little more. And Android's where it hit me personally.
Yeah.
So the solution was to pull the app and not honor any kind of feature requests because the vast majority of them were, obviously not legitimate.
That's a shame.
It's not, I didn't like that solution. And to be honest, I agonized over what to do for 2 weeks. I just couldn't, I tried to talk to some of the people who I knew were pirates because the app was 99 cents. how can I convince you to purchase it? And some of them came to the position where we don't pay for apps.
Yeah, that there are, and that's just how some people feel about it. And I can understand there's maybe some people who just really question the value of a good like that, because it doesn't, you don't know how long it's going to work. You might get a different type of phone in 2 years, something like that. So
fair enough, but this is not, Adobe Creative Suite for $1,000.
That's true. It's 99
This
cents.
is 99 cents. It's really, and then when you're pirating, you run the risk of, there was this big news story I saw on Ars Technica. There was a new Android Trojan, apparently, and even one on iOS now that got out into the wild.
They've been taken out of the App Store, though, and the marketplace.
They've been dealt with, but honestly, I don't understand piracy at this low level.
It's almost just at that point, it's almost a principle not to pay for anything.
Right, which is, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but if you're in the audience, because I've gotten a lot of emails from people telling me they're developing apps, they're developing, desktop apps, mobile apps, whatever, you might want to think of a different monetization model, to be honest with you, than selling the app. Because the risk is once someone breaks the DRM and gets it, you make no money. And if your app has a backend, the argument that piracy doesn't hurt the developer in terms of money is wrong if the app has a backend. Because as we just discussed, pay per usage. Those users are now costing you more money every time they hit that server.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you determine a pirated user from a good user to start cutting them off?
Yeah.
It's more than just lost revenue. It's support time. It's server resources. It's really, and I know I'm getting a little preachy here, so I'm just going to drop it. But
get on my soapbox, but it's
you're doing more than stealing 99 cents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it was just 99 cents, it's trivial.
If it's just some fart app.
Yeah. But if it's actually something that ties in or has some kind of, data pooling or something that requires a backend, you're robbing them every time you open it.
You're also robbing from future ongoing development.
All right. Well, it's very likely they're going to shut down the service.
Mm-hmm. So we're in a world where you think DRM might be necessary. But how is this issue any different than probably the same exact problem desktops went through? And we got through it somehow without DRM.
Well, so I don't think DRM is necessarily the answer on mobile.
Oh.
I think the answer is to give up on the old business model. In most cases, it's just too hard to charge for an app. You need to go with some kind of freemium model, especially for games, because a game is a huge investment, and once someone's stolen it, you'll never recoup it.
Right.
So, and in the chat room, they're talking about having respect for your users, and I have lots of respect for my users. But if you stole the app, I don't consider you a user. Right? I consider you a thief. Because you are. So it's by definition, you stole something, you're a thief.
There you go.
It's and I understand, I'm just saying, I understand pirating Adobe for $1,000, $2,000, sure. 99 cents, guys. Just think about it. There's some small guy, it's not Google, it's not Apple.
You know what it might be? It might be people just are outside the U.S., maybe in their country where 99 cents is a lot more. I don't know.
The price scales down.
Oh, well, it's not that then.
Yeah.
I was trying to come up with some sort of excuse why maybe humanity isn't a bunch of stinkers, but...
Well, I mean, I'll get off the soapbox here. And I'd love feedback on, because you're right, heavy DRM is a bad idea.
I've never really had an issue with the DRM on, I guess... That's not true. On Android I have, but that's because I had this app where a developer implemented his own DRM, and then when I got a new phone, it went wonky and didn't work.
Yeah, so do not implement your own DRM, because all you're going to do is create a support nightmare and brew bad will among your users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you're better off changing your business model to be some kind of in-app purchase freemium model or subscription model than using, you don't want to support a DRM platform. It's too hard. It's not practical.
Do you have much experience with in-app purchase? Because it does seem like maybe that works.
A lot of my clients are going that way. A lot of games go that way. Honestly, most of the apps I'm currently working on are in-app purchase. Because at that point, you don't care if the person pirated it as long as they buy something.
Yeah.
I mean, it hurts your statistics on users, but most people are putting in Google Analytics or Flurry Analytics in their mobile apps anyway. On the desktop, it's a little different. So in the desktop, you're in more of the traditional, couple dollars for the app, $10 for the app.
Mm-hmm.
But like JB Viewer 3 is saying, in the in-app purchase model, the app is in fact the loss leader, right?
Yeah.
It's a sunk cost that you're hoping to recoup. But again, that's a whole big issue, right? Of what's an appropriate in-app purchase versus what's being scummy and out of scope for today.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That could be a whole nother show, couldn't it?
It definitely should.
Okay.
And if anyone has a better horror story than mine, because I realize I got a little hulky on that one, please email it in. We'll try and get one for next week.
Absolutely. I see you have a book pick here. This is great. We actually have people write in and say, hey, if you have any book suggestions, please leave them in here. And these are also awesome because if people click the link in the show notes to get this, they'll be supporting the show too. So what's the pick?
It's called The Passionate Programmer. It's published by Pragmatic Programmers. So it's a little more of a soft pick than the last few. The last few were actually about code itself.
Mm-hmm.
This one's about navigating a career in software development.
Interesting.
It's targeted more for the enterprise-style developer, but the author draws some interesting parallels between being a consultant and working in the enterprise.
I could see that.
Yeah, not to spoil, but basically, if you're a good Java developer, the last thing you should be studying is Java. Right, because there's this idea of diminishing returns.
Yeah, you figured it out, so focus on something else.
Once you're proficient enough at one thing, it makes sense to jump to another. That way you can kind of be more versatile, be more of a generalist, and hopefully be more valuable to your company.
Yeah. Yeah, and you never know, you might find something else that you love. That's why again, just, as a plug, there's that Code School is great for that because you can go play with stuff. See
and honestly, Chris, in this economy, you may get laid off. And if you have a couple tools in your tool belt, you could probably be a consultant for a while or get another job. If not, it's a big risk these days to just be a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it is. I mean, if you're just a C#.NET guy, even if you're the best C#.NET guy, or even the best Cocoa guy, times change. There's more competition in certain technologies from overseas, things like that. It's just better to be well-rounded. In addition, I'm studying F# right now, which I think I mentioned last show. There is no practical use for me to use F# ever. I know I'm not going to use it for any kind of paying project. But the whole functional paradigm is really influencing not only my JavaScript, but also my Objective-C, and to a lesser extent, my Java. So just keep learning. And this is the argument the author makes. Just keep learning no matter what, and try and be as far away from your normal problem domain as possible. So I don't do .NET, so I'm learning something in .NET. Right.
Great advice. Get outside your problem domain, because it's interesting when your focus is one thing, when you work with something else, you'll find ways that something else can apply to what your main focus is too. And what
was interesting, I opened Visual Studio 2010 and it blew my mind. 2012. Do you know they have code generation that Xcode could only dream of?
Oh yeah, and I've heard it's an incredible product.
And that Eclipse could only dream of. Eclipse is a lot better than Xcode, but still. It's good to get out of your normal. I know there's a hell of a lot of Python guys here, which is strange, but guys, honestly, it's time to learn some. I think everybody should learn VBasic 6.
It's got a long-term support path laid out.
It's got another 10 years in it.
Yeah, 10 years. That's like 25, 30 years in computer life. So think about how long that is.
VBasic 6 is going to outlive me. I guarantee it.
Plus, super easy. You learn it in a weekend.
It's easy to write it the first time, maintaining it.
So you have a tool of the week, always my favorite part because it's usually something cool.
Yes, my tool of the week is Chris Fisher. For his
Nexus Q remarks.
Exactly. No, so my tool of the week is going to be controversial this week. Because it's called Cloud9. It is another web IDE. And I know I did one a few weeks ago, but the reason I'm featuring this one is because they convinced me to actually use it pretty much full time for one of my projects.
It looks like it does collaborative coding. It's kind of like Google Docs kind of a situation there.
Exactly. That's exactly why, because I'm working with a remote developer. And it's just so much easier to actually both of you be in there typing and changing things and making notes in real time.
Oh, the UI looks really slick too.
Right. Right. Rather than saying, well, on line 115, maybe we should change this. Go right in there. Well, how about this? And you see it in real time. Additionally, if you're using one of these platforms as a service, okay, they support Microsoft Azure, but I'm assuming no one here is using that. They also support Heroku with 1-click or 2-click deployment.
That is really neat. Yeah, and they also support VMware, which is really awesome.
Yep.
And Bitbucket.
Yeah, and GitHub. So
Yeah,
if you have an existing repo, you can actually log in with your GitHub or Bitbucket credentials, and it pulls it in for you and sets it all up and makes pushing, pulling, all that very straightforward. It has a bash terminal built in. So a command line guy like me, you just do everything like you would in your terminal. It even has a Vim mode where you can use Vim commands to navigate the editor. Has intelligent syntax highlighting for a number of platforms. I'm currently using it for Node. Yes, Node, not Rails. Someone's saying in the chat room. I'm actually doing Node right now. It's really a great tool. I have one little bone to pick.
Oh, yeah?
If you scroll down on that page, Chris,
yeah,
they say they have a Mac and a Linux client.
Right.
Which is not entirely true. So I downloaded the Ubuntu client, or the Linux client.
It's not just a web page?
It is. It is just a web page, which is my issue. It's not even wrapped in like a Unity shell, or in the Mac case, a Cocoa shell.
They're just like saying it's Mac or Linux or Windows ready just to make people, oh yeah, I see download for Linux. And it's even a tar.gz file.
Literally, I opened it and it popped up in Chrome. But
that's cute.
When I did it on the Mac, and actually because the Mac wasn't configured with Node yet, it doesn't tell you that you need Node. It just crashes, and you have to manually install Node from the command line. So they have a long way to go for their client support, where they need to take that off their feature list.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's no reason that can't be wrapped in a nice Unity window, with just a web view and done like that. It would look a lot nicer. It would feel more native. And it could still be their same HTML5 JavaScript code.
Yeah.
But other than that...
And it's free if you want to just play with like a real basic account, which is cool. And they got like a $12 a month account if you want to step it up.
Yeah, I ended up stepping it up. But I'll admit it, this tool's not for everybody. So if you're like an enterprise .NET developer, they have nothing for you.
Well, just like Google Docs isn't for everybody.
That's right. Google Docs isn't. This is for a specific class of web developer or people who do a lot of web development.
Yeah.
And you have to, honestly, you have to trust them, and you have to be comfortable with this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will say that when we covered coding the other week, this is a much more stable and much more mature. This tool's out of beta. This tool's actually a commercial product now.
Right.
So, if you're comparing the two, take that with a grain of salt. That one's, you got to give coding some time if you're between them.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, very nice, sir. I think you just brought us to the end of the show right there. Another great
episode.
So where should people find you during the week?
They can find me at Twitter at Dumanuko. They can find me at my name on Google+. And if you're interested in that asynchronous iOS tutorial, go to mdominic.com. Right. Additionally, I would ask that people send in their horror stories for next week.
Yeah, that'd be fun. We want to get some. We don't have any right now, of course, because we just announced this. So email your horror story to coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
And bonus points if you can make Chris cry.
You can also use the contact form and join us live on Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific or noon Eastern time over at jblive.tv or jblive.fm for the audio. And you get to star in our chat room because we always have that up on the screen. So awesome. All right, Michael, well, thank you for the great show.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. And thank you for tuning to this week's episode of Coder Radio. See you right back here next week.